So guys, meta decks. For my top 5 meta decks so far, we're like 2 weeks into the format. I think to start off with at number 5, I'll definitely say Dogmatika Invoke Shaddoll. Yeah, this deck is always good at beginning of formats, even though the format hasn't changed much. The main thing that just makes this deck so good, I think, is just the bombs. I mean, Nadir Servant, Shaddoll Fusion, Meltdown, you've got Alistar. There's so many cards in this deck that they resolve and then they basically win. That's what makes it so good. It's just hard to deal with. Your opponent has to make lots of complicated decisions, basically. Do I negate the Meltdown? What if he has Shaddoll Fusion in my hand? What if he has Nadir Servant in his hand? If I negate the Meltdown, if I don't negate the Meltdown now, I can't negate Invocation later. So do I risk doing that? Blah, blah, blah. All of these different things. They've just got so many good cards. Now, obviously, it plays a lot of bricks. That's the biggest problem with this deck, because pretty much all the Shaddoll monsters are soft bricks. And let me say it, they're not bricks, but it plays a lot of 2 and 3 card combos with the fusions. Sometimes you're going to fusion from the deck, sometimes you're not, and this is kind of compounded by the fact that Shaddoll Fusion is a horrible card going first, but it's a great card going second. You really want to use it going second when your opponent already has monsters on the board, monsters in the graveyard, monsters from the extra deck specifically. So that's kind of a weakness of this deck, but even in spite of that, it's just really, really good. It has okay matchups against a lot of decks. I would say it has very strong matchups against a lot of decks, and it has terrible matchups against other decks, but yeah, definitely a really good deck. Ariel's also busted right now. Obviously, graveyard control is huge in this format, so yeah, definitely I would definitely recommend using Ariel. Actually, one thing I would say is don't copy my list, don't use Genius. Genius is trash. I was trying it out, doesn't do anything relevant. But yeah, this deck is great. Oh, another thing as well is this deck can main deck Super Poly. It's one of the few decks at the moment that can main deck Super Poly against pretty much everyone, because they've got targets for everything. So yeah, Dogmatika Invoke Shaddoll. Now number 4, I'd say Virtual World, but I would say that Dogmatika Invoke Shaddoll and Virtual World are about the same level right now. Virtual World, I think, is going to climb as the deck is getting. The deck is the only deck that pretty much got buffed in the last ban list, and so as it gets more and more solved, it will definitely climb up. Like I've been playing flipping Madolche's, Orcust, Eldritch. That's what I've been playing. I haven't even gone back to my Virtual World build to try and solve it more, because I'm just thinking the deck's going to change so much, especially with Burst of Destiny. So right now, this is, I would say it's 4 as well, but it has the potential to become one of the best decks, maybe 1 or 2 later on as it gets solved better. But yeah, Virtual World, one of the things about Virtual World is that it's just good. It's good against every single deck in the format. It's great against others. It doesn't really have bad matchups. There's no such thing as a bad Virtual World matchup for the most part, in my opinion. There's no matchup I come up against I'm like, oh, I'm probably going to lose. All I'm thinking is, oh, am I going to brick? Like, literally, that's it. The deck just bricks. That's its biggest weakness. It's also, I wouldn't say immune, but it doesn't really care about Valorant and Perm, and they're 2 of the best hand traps, obviously. So being able to completely ignore 2 of the best hand traps that people pretty much have to main deck for other decks, but you don't have to care about them, it just makes the deck so good. Shen Shen Chuche is really, really strong. Yeah, just being able to continually put that up a wall. Shen Shen Chuche beats most decks. I mean, yeah, Prank Kids, what are Prank Kids doing through that in their main deck? They can't do anything. Same with Invoke Shaddoll, by the way. That's probably one of the worst matchups for them, Virtual World. They find it so hard because it's just hard for them to deal with Shen Shen coming back, and they haven't got a consistent way of killing Shen Shen. So yeah, it's just a really, really good deck for that reason. Another nice thing about Virtual World is the fact that they can just play a huge toolbox in the extra deck. Because of the ability to shuffle cards back with Nian and Chuche, it means that they only pretty much ever need 1 copy of the card in the extra deck, and so they just have a huge toolbox in the extra deck. I mean, yeah, you have removal for everything. You have Zeus. This deck can very easily make 4 material Zeus as well. That was how I played the deck anyway. That's my goal: make Zeus. Turn 1 survive. Turn 3 make Zeus. Turn 5, there's no turn 5. I've won after I made Zeus, and so the ability to do that in this deck is also really, really good. So yeah, Virtual definitely number 4 at the moment. It's a fun deck to play. Definitely, it will frustrate you a little, but fun deck to play. Definitely has a lot of potential. We might see it get even better in the format. Moving on, at number 3, I'm gonna put Phantom Knight. But Phantom Knight, look, this deck is this isn't Phantom Knight. This is Burning Abyss. Oh, not Burning Abyss. This is Tri-Brigade. Give me 1 second, guys. Alright, so I'm back. I don't know why I had Tri-Brigade there, but yeah, Phantom Knight, number 3. So I'm putting them at number 3, but I'm telling you now, this deck, I have so much more respect for it. I already put it high on my list before, and I think definitely it has potential to become one of the best decks of the format, this or next format. If it doesn't get hit and Drytron gets hit, this will become the best combo deck of the format for sure. Phantom Knight is nutty. Now, one of the things I think that's so incredible about this deck is that it's virtually impossible to stop game 1. It's similar to I would say Drytron is almost easier to stop in some circumstances. So I'd say Drytron's end board is harder to deal with, but Drytron's combo is easier to stop than this. So this deck, we all know how Burn the Abyss cards work essentially, and their initial combo loop of obviously Cherubini and stuff, that's pretty much impossible to stop. Unless you can kill their first normal summon really hard and they have no extenders, they're gonna get to Cherubini. Then they get to Cherubini, you know what Cherubini does? It sends something for cost. So it's hard to stop Cherubini, and if you kill the Cherubini, they're just going to reborn it anyway with Cyril Graph, and then they go into their Bardiche. Now Bardiche is probably the best place to initially stop them. If you stop the Bardiche, it's quite hard for the deck to put the Fog Blades on the field, but they could, because if they opened any of the Phantom Knight monsters, they're just going to search them anyway. So I mean, the deck's just really good. It has loads of ways to get to its end board, and then also it does the same thing as Drytron. Again, this isn't a build that I'm using, this is a net deck build just to show you guys for an example, but I put those in there just to represent that if they mess up their initial combo, then they just pass on Dragoon. They do Dragoon plus Fog Blades pass, and that's still really hard to deal with. And then what's really good about this deck is they have a very strong resource game. They can like, everything banishes from the grave to have an effect, and as part of their combo a lot of times they're going to go into Leviair to make Utopic Future. That's not in this list as well. I don't know where I got this trash ass list from. It hasn't got Utopic Future or Dragoon. What's this guy doing? But in any case, yeah, they're going to make Leviair for Utopic Future, and so their PKs are in the grave again. Half of the traps are monster, not half, all of their traps apart from Shade are monster reborns as well, which is also very strong. I mean, it's just a really good deck. Great recursion, great end boards, hard to deal with, so hard to interrupt. After siding, it's not as bad, but definitely a really good deck. Now, another thing that I would say is giving them a lot of strength in the meta at the moment is the fact that Super Poly isn't really a good side deck card at the moment, because Super Poly tends to only be good when dark decks are good, because they're the best Super Poly targets. Right now, this is pretty much the only dark deck, like only dark deck, as opposed to kind of like Shadow, which has some dark monsters. So this is like the only dark deck that is in the meta at the moment, and so you don't really want to run Super Poly just for this. You're running three Super Poly just for this deck. I mean, it's not amazing. So that's another thing that's definitely given them a lot of strength. If we get Dragon Link, for example, becoming a lot stronger, we might see a little bit less. Though having said that, they're not even ending on dark monsters half the time. They're ending on like light and dark now. So, but yeah, PK definitely a really good deck, definitely has potential. Drytron is the better combo deck, but this definitely has huge potential as well. But speaking of, that's the number 2 Drytron. Yeah, it's just OP. Just OP. The hit to Eva didn't do nothing, hit to Benton didn't do nothing. Sometimes when Konami does hits, I don't really know what they're thinking. Like, I'm trying to understand, like, I know it's profit incentive and stuff, but even then it's like, then just don't bother hitting it. It's almost like you hit Eva and you hurt other decks more than you hurt Drytron. But yeah, Drytron, the thing about Drytron that's just so good, it's just so hard to stop. Similar to PK, it's not as hard to stop as PK, but it's still very hard to stop because it's easier to get their Heralds to the hand. And then once they've done that and they get Herald of Ultimus, Herald of Perfection on board, you literally need very specific cards to out that, otherwise you're not playing the game. You need like a Droplet or a Dark Ruler no more, or you need a what's it called, a Kaiju. Like you need something like that to stop them, and so that gives them just a huge amount of potential, because it means that they're going to, again, this is another deck that game 1 they're just going to beat you. They're just going to beat you because you're probably not main decking some of these cards. You might be, but a lot of times you're not going to be main decking because you can't afford to main deck it against the rest of the format. And one funny thing is, like my locals, for example, there's pretty much no Drytron players, so I don't have to prepare for this, but I'm cognizant of the fact that if a Drytron player comes to my locals, and I don't think it's just me, I think it's against most of us, they're going to clean up because most of us aren't preparing for Drytron because we know no one's playing it. But yeah, like if people aren't prepared for you, they're going to just lose because it's such a strong deck. Yeah, really good. And then similar, like I said, it's similar to PK, and then if you interrupt them, almost 100% sure they're going to just Dragoon pass. Their recursion is also great as well, because obviously all their cards are going to plus from the graveyard, which is nice as well. So yeah, Drytron, really strong deck. I think they could be the best deck of the format. I think especially for me, I don't play against it as much, so maybe that's why I haven't got as much respect and why I didn't put it as number 1. But to be honest, functionally, my number 1 and number 2 are also very strong decks. You could put either. But yeah, Drytron, really good deck. I don't know if it's going to survive enough ban list. It's sad as well because I really like this deck. I like the kind of Space Horses theme and everything. I love ritual decks, but I just haven't really played this format because it's just not worth the money in my opinion. I'm not dropping hundreds of pounds on flipping Heralds. But lastly, the best deck of the format, and that's not the right one. It's going to be Tri-Brigade. Yeah, so this is actually Anthony Zoo's list. He topped with Melfi Tri-Brigade. And yeah, it's just really good to see how people have kind of like iterated on the Tri-Brigade build and sort of have improved in spite of the hits that the deck got. yeah, Tri Brigade is just a really, really strong deck. One of the greatest things about it is not always going to be Revolt. Resolving Revolt means you win the game a lot of the time. And then it's just got a very small, efficient engine. Not just small, but efficient. The engine, everything basically searches everything else. Sending to the graveyard is functionally the same as searching because they do everything off the graveyard anyway. And so, yeah, the ability to go Fractal, Kit, Nerval, Keras, I mean, it's strong. And then also, and I was watching an interview that Patrick Hoban did with Farfar, and he's describing what makes a deck good, and it's Tri Brigade to a T, and it's just having two very consistent lines that you can do, combo lines that you can do virtually every turn, independent of each other as well. If your normal summon gets negated when you try a normal summon combo, you can just do Keras combo instead, and that's part of what makes it so good, because it's just hard to consistently interrupt. You're going to sometimes stop them, and I think that's probably one of the things people think about Tri Brigade, that it's like, oh yeah, but you can stop it, just stop the two summons, but you always have to have two hand traps to stop Tri Brigade. It's not just sometimes, it's like you always have to pretty much have two hand traps, because their standard combo is always going to give those two lines of play, which is really, really good. And then, yeah, like I said, Revolt plus Shuraig, because if Shuraig didn't exist, or if Shuraig targeted, for example, it would make Revolt a lot less strong, because then it's like you can't just Shuraig anything. But Shuraig essentially allows them to compete at the top level, because it means that they have removal for the top level monsters like Dragoon and stuff, which is really good. That's never a problem. You never have to worry about Dragoon as a Tri Brigade player, because you're just going to banish off the field anyway. And then you're going to access code after that to win the game. So yeah, Tri Brigade's a really, really good deck. Definitely going to be the best of the format. But, you know, arguably you could call Drytron instead. I don't know. They're both really good decks. But yeah, this is definitely my top 5 meta decks. And yeah, and well done to Adnizu for topping with this Melfi list. I really like the Melfi list instead, simply because it lets you use Obedience Scored, which has been begging to be broken for so long. I mean, this card's just insane. But yeah, definitely a really, really good list. Definitely a really, really good deck. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.